is the Reverend Tony Lorenzen, and I'm grateful you are watching my channel. This week's reflection is called This Hard Land, Difficult Truths, Honest History, and Celebrating Thanksgiving Without Telling Lies. Hope you enjoy it.
The relationship had started off cautiously. The English did not immediately come in and enslave, subjugate, and exterminate the native peoples. And the native peoples had their own politics, alliances, and conflicts among themselves and different groups. Both the English and the Indians made alliance of convenience with each other at times to further their own political purposes. In fact, one way that English explorers and merchants convinced the English crown to venture into North America was the argument that they would provide, they being the English, would provide a more civilized relationship with the native savages than the Spanish. The English knew of Bartolomeo de las Casas' account of Spanish brutality in Florida and the Caribbean, and vowed to be more humane in their bringing of the gospel to the native savages than the Spanish had. That was mostly rhetoric, and by the 1630s, the native leaders had had enough of the English always wanting more land, always letting their livestock run wild and eating native crops, and reneging on their side of the bargain in agreement after agreement. That was only the first decade and a half. The Puritans often declared days of public thanksgiving for many positive fortunes that befell them, which they saw as the direct hand of God. And as time wore on, many of these were for victories over the Indians. In 1637, the governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, John Winthrop, issued a proclamation of thanksgiving to celebrate the safe return of a group of colonists who had gone to Mystic, Connecticut to take part in the massacre of the Pico there. Now it is near Mystic in 1637, the body of an Englishman was found dead in a boat. The English punished the Indians for this, as it must have been the work of the natives. The retaliation came when the Pico gathered for the Great Green Corn Dance, an annual harvest celebration. The English decided to attack just before dawn and ordered the Pico out of their longhouses. And when the Pico came out, they were shot or beaten to death. The women and children and elders who did not come out were burned alive in the longhouse. Over 700 Pico were murdered. And that was when John Winthrop, governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, declared a day of thanksgiving to celebrate this victory. There was a day of thanksgiving kept in all the churches for the victory obtained against the Pico and for other mercies. Another such day was also declared in October for more victories against the Pico. The Pico and others who were conquered or surrendered filled boats by the hundreds from New England that took them to the Caribbean, where they were sold into slavery. Many thanksgivings were declared. During one, the residents of Stamford, Connecticut, kicked severed Indian heads through the streets in celebration. Ooh, this is a hard one. And a hard history. Mentors all told me when I began teaching high school, and again when I began in the ministry, to start as you mean to go on. It's good advice for just about anything, really. Learning a new skill, taking up a new sport or hobby, relationships, jobs. It's difficult, or more difficult anyway, to correct course once you've begun something poorly. It's much harder to master a skill if you start off with a poor practice and study regimen. I played guitar for nearly 25 years before I started getting any good at it. I never practiced when I was a teenager. If I couldn't learn something quickly, I gave up and learned something else instead. I can only imagine how much better I'd be at playing the guitar today if I had had the discipline to start off with, to master skills and techniques, to truly learn patterns and rhythms, and develop my ear from those early days. I'm glad I finally got it into my head to do so and practice these things that were difficult or less exciting, because I've become a much better guitar player for it, and I enjoy it more. You know, holding history is extremely difficult for us in America, because in our earliest days we talked a good game, but we didn't walk the walk. Unfortunately, this pattern of saying one thing and doing another was built into the country from the start. Oh, we started as we meant to go on, but we started manipulating our own story to glorify white English colonizers, ignoring the problem of enslaving human beings and only including men in the category of people we deemed created equal. We the people was never meant to be all the people by the people who wrote it. And our country has been going on as it was started for nearly 250 years, plus, if you count the time of the English colonies. As we saw once again this week with another verdict exonerating an obviously guilty white male murderer, the system is not broken. It is working exactly as it was designed to work, favoring those it was designed to favor, protecting those it was designed to protect. Holding history is hard. For one, because it's quite often inaccurate as to actual events. And the myths created to promote the inaccuracies are powerful and pervasive. History's hard. Every year there are events on the calendar, Black History Month, Juneteenth, Thanksgiving, that remind us just how hard our history is. And because of that history, what a hard land we still live in. 100 years before the American Revolution formally began with the Battle of the Old North Bridge in Concord, Massachusetts, another war began in New England that had as much to do with the formation of our national psyche as that one. It was a war that set the tone for genocide, racism, and white supremacy. We've come to know this war as King Phillip's War. Only 50 years after the Pilgrims arrived, it was the end of the beginning chapter of the history and the beginning of the end and the erasure of the indigenous people from the story. Outside New England, I've discovered few Americans even know about this war. I know about it because I had to learn it in history class growing up in Massachusetts. I don't know if you've ever heard of King Philip's War. I remember when my son was going to school in Texas, it was not in his history curriculum. For 14 months during 1675 and 1676, Massasoit's son Metacom, chief of the Wampanoag, called King Philip by the English, led a coalition of his people along with the Nipmuc, Pocketumtuck, and Narragansett tribes in a final attempt to resist the English. The fighting took part mostly in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, but found its way a little bit into all of the New England territories. The English received some assistance from the Mohegans and the Mohawks. In terms of percentage of population killed, it is the deadliest war in American history, with over 10% of the combined English indigenous population of New England dying in that 14-month conflict. Historian Jill Lepore notes that the English won King Philip's War by, quote, wound and by word. Even though it was the deadliest war in our history, the war of words the English waged was even deadlier to the Indians in the end. For the Indians had no written language, and the English used books and pamphlets and other publications to a huge advantage in propaganda. The English portrayed the Indians as vicious, brutal, unforgiving, savage, ignorant, ungodly, and evil. The Indians tortured their captives, raped women, and massacred the young and the old without regard for what the Europeans called the rules of war. When the war finally ended, Metacom was killed and beheaded and his severed head put on a pike that stood in Plymouth for over 25 years. 25 years. But the Indians were brutal savages. The outcome of King Philip's War was not a foregone conclusion. And if the native population hadn't been decimated by European diseases that invaded through contact with European fishermen and trappers before the Pilgrims arrived, the indigenous population in New England may have been too large for the English to succeed. We'll never know. When the Pilgrims got to Plymouth, it was called Patuxent, and it was a thriving village of thousands, and they were all gone, dead from disease. Start as you mean to go on. This would be the narrative for all the Indian wars to follow as white people swept westward across North America. And just as the English broke their early treaties and agreements with the New England tribes, so too would our government break treaties as conquest and genocide went west. Is it any wonder Frank James started the National Day of Mourning? America is a hard land. Its history is hard and hard to hold. How does one hold so many hard, difficult truths? Even if we wanted to wrap our hands around American history, even if we wanted to grab it in an embrace, it's too big. It's too oddly shaped. There's too many pieces to put together, like a jigsaw puzzle of thousands of small, irregular shapes, desperately trying to make a picture together, to make some sense. Kyle Rittenhouse was found not guilty of murders he obviously committed, and we're angry but not surprised. White supremacists kill people in plain view of others on video, and they're not guilty. Because the people who were killed were the God received. Start as you need to go on. We continue still to today as we started. Our hard land is home to a hard family, the American people. Like many modern families, it's a family with members who enable the dysfunction and those who refuse to enable the dysfunction. Like being in a family where you refuse to make excuses for an alcoholic parent, some of us refuse to deal in the dysfunction any longer. And even though it's hard, we try to find the accurate history, the story we need to tell all together, so the land gets easier. And our past, as difficult as it is, comes into focus as a whole. We must do this. We must name genocide, we must name white supremacy, we must name transphobia. We must call things out into the open, as hard as it ever may be to do. We must ruin Thanksgiving dinner if we have to. Well, we're going to continue to go on as we started. And going on as we started is no longer an option. We have to go on as we start a new way. To begin a new way, build a new way, to make the land and its history less hardened, cold. Start the new way from which we can truly buy into going on in its fashion. Karen Walrond's new book, The Lightmaker's Manifesto, How to Work with Change Without Losing Your Joy, says she believes that although our differences cause division, ultimately they are our greatest power in overcoming to build a new way. She said in an interview with Brene Brown that activism by definition doesn't occur when things are great. We don't become activists because life is peachy and perfect and everyone has equal rights and we all have health care. We do it We become activists because something ticked us off. We do it because something's wrong. We do it because we see something needs to be changed. And so how can we get into that and go with that journey, with the work where it leads us, and find joy in the work of making things better? She says activism is being led by your values to do something that helps other people and make the world brighter for other people. And the really important part of that is that you do something. The root of activism is actos, meaning to act, to do a deed. And it requires a something, like you're moved to do something from your values. And it can't be just to help yourself. It may help a community of which you're a part, but it's other-facing. It's supposed to help other people. So yeah, she says, a full action, and nobody says that action has to be gigantic or death-defying. Reverend Dr. King said quite often, there's really very little difference between the scale of the very small and the scale of the very large. For over 20 years now, my brother does something that is neither gigantic nor that puts his life in danger. Each fall, in the 6 weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, he peddles pie. Community Servings is a Boston area nonprofit that provides nutritious, diet-sensitive, and specific meals for free to people with terminal or chronic illness and their families. Their largest fundraiser is what they call Pie in the Sky, Boston's biggest bake sale. They get chefs from Boston's premier restaurants to make thousands of pies for Thanksgiving. Apple, pecan, sweet potato, blueberry, pumpkin. And they sell them. I think this year they were $25 each. People order pies and pick them up at various locations around Boston in a couple of days, like from now to Wednesday before Thanksgiving. If you don't want to keep the pie for yourself, they'll give the pie to one of the families they feed, and thank you very much for your gift. My brother has been one of their biggest sellers for nearly 20 years. This year, 2 years worth of free meals. He used to do this by phone, postcard, but he's a communications director. He's worked for large corporations. He's worked for CBS TV. Now it's a massive social media campaign every fall. He sells hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pies. He does something. He makes his community a better place. He helps others. It's not grand and it's not death-defying. In a sense, he does it in his spare time, offhandedly for the most part. He's just good at communication. And people who are in genuine pain have their lives made easier because he did something. He has started acting as he wants the world to go on. Make this land a little less hard. That's a reminder that the way this hard land softens and becomes a gentle, forgiving, welcoming, accepting, loving, just land is that you act. You act in anti-racist, kind, compassionate, loving, inclusive ways for right and good. You act when and where you are and how you can for others. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. Hit the darkness until it bleeds daylight, as the song goes. And make no mistake, parenting is acting. Helping our refugee family with New Start Ministry is acting. Showing up on Sunday afternoon at Playhouse Corner to witness is acting. Helping our children here with a values-based spiritual education in our religious education program is acting. Teaching and nursing are acting. Working for a nonprofit is acting. It doesn't need to be grand or death-defying to help. You don't have to march in Washington or go to the tar sands pipeline in the Badlands or to the Mexican border. It's good some people do those things. It's necessary people do those things. But you don't have to act to make a difference. You can do something else. Sometimes acting is small or seems very small. Voting, speaking up at a town meeting, being the one who confronts the racist at Thanksgiving dinner, even though it's not nice. Eventually, your acting, if you act consistently enough and long enough, will become more radicalized and extreme. As Reverend Dr. King said, we want to be extremists for love. Giving thanks is good. Festivals of Thanksgiving and festivals for blessings are good. The American myth of Thanksgiving is not. It's a lie. It enables us to go on as we started uncritically, never getting better, never repenting for our sins. So take action. Make a new Thanksgiving. Start in a way that you're proud to go on. A Thanksgiving that recognizes the benefits of just giving thanks and rewiring neural pathways to be more aware of positives. A Thanksgiving that's grateful for having enough to eat and having shelter and having community and loved ones. A Thanksgiving that revels in being grateful and giving thanks because doing so is acting and it's good. Thanksgiving need not be celebrated by perpetuating the American myth that covers up the white supremacy and the killing. Thanksgiving can and should be joyous. People all over the world, in all different cultures and all different religious traditions, have rituals and celebration of Thanksgiving. Let us join in that way of Thanksgiving. Let's sow those seeds in this hard land with its hard history. Let's take action. Start a new beginning. Start as we mean to go.
Thank you for watching This Hard Land. It would help me a lot if you would click that thumbs up button, give this video a like, and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate that. We'll see you next time.